You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Welcome. Global Trade This Week has landed. I am Doug Draper, your co-host, and on the other side of the coast is my friend, partner in crime, Mr. Pete Mento. Peter, how's life out there in New Hampshire?
It's great, man. Live free or die. There are worse evils than death. So
we can't start that way on this one. We can't start that way. Nope, we're good.
Yeah.
So
no, man, it's great. It's great. I'm all packed up. I'm getting ready to go to the airport. I'm giving a speech tomorrow with my friend Captain Alex Uhanoff to TAPA's annual meeting on cybersecurity and the supply chain. So yeah, on planes. Late next week, I fly to London. I am giving a speech for The Economist magazine. They're doing World Trade Day live for the first time in forever.
Right.
And that is as long as my job doesn't force me to be home. And then the week after that, I'm speaking at our supplier summit, our big annual supplier summit in Boston for all of our wonderful suppliers for Wayfair. So lots of speaking. And then it just dies. It just dies, Doug. It's like nobody wants to, summer starts and nobody wants to have anyone show up for speeches. And that's fine with me. I'm going to get on my motorcycle and enjoy some fresh air, buddy.
There you go. Well, I know Tapas has been a big supporter of the show. When does that happen again? Where is it?
Today and tomorrow in Memphis, Tennessee, buddy. And I'm not going to have time to go to Graceland or I'll pick you up some Elvis stuff. But no, not this time, buddy.
All right. Well, in and out. Get the job done. Hopefully it'll be a good event. You can tell us about it next week.
Yeah, it's always great. TAPA's always great.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, you know what else is great, Pete, is this show. And it's time to start and jump in with our topics. So I'm working on my transitions, man. How? Huh?
It's tough. Yeah, transitions are tough. It's one of the hardest parts of comedy, but you work hard at it, buddy. So,
Thank you. All right. That being said, fire away. Topic one.
Yeah, man. So topic one is very relevant to our times, and it has to do with inflation. So all of us listen to the news every week, and we hear about how inflation is growing, and we hear this number. So this week, the number is about 8.7%. And, it's kind of like when people tell me tennis statistics. I guess that's impressive, but I don't even know how you score tennis. I never have. Or when people tell me about the CrossFit games, and how someone did at the CrossFit games. I don't know, man. Basketball statistics, same thing. Or probably like when I talk about hockey statistics to you, you have no idea what I'm talking about, or rugby statistics. Inflation, we just know that when we start talking about it, it must be bad. That's kind of the way that most Americans look at inflation. But I'm here to tell you that we're not really talking about just how bad inflation is. During the 1980s, again in the 1990s, we radically changed the way that we discussed inflation because we went from a peg where we looked at inflation based on how the dollar was reacting to a market basket of goods. So in the 1980s and the 1990s, we looked at the US dollar and how it was incorporated against other currencies and a commodity, which at that point was actually gold. And instead we said, well, let's not do that because that number is so radical and terrifying, and there's nothing the government can do to manipulate it. And instead, let's go to a market basket of goods. And it's worked out pretty well because inflation and the Federal Reserve is a way for us to keep people from panicking, keeping markets in line, and doing a better job of politically keeping people in office. So now we look at the price of a certain type of goods that every American buys. And it's easier for us to consume as people who are impacted by an economy, gasoline, energy, price of cars, rental cars, rents, right? Certain types of food commodities like eggs and milk and bread. So it's easier when you look at that graph to see it. But in reality, if we were to look at inflation, which we're being told that market basket of goods is worth about 8.7%, right? Difference. Inflation is actually at damn near 18.9% higher than it would have been if we used the old gauge of inflation, 18.9%. which it has not been that high since 1949, at the very end of World War II, when we were churning out war bonds and the US dollar was worth practically nothing because of our war effort against the Axis. Why does that matter? It matters because the way we look at things and the quote unquote optics of things are extremely important to Washington, D.C. and the world. Inflation has never been this bad, and a good part of that reason is because of our quantitative easing and the way that the Federal Reserve has been having to deal with both the COVID shutdowns, the American economy over the past 2 decades having to deal with the constant up and downs of our economic strife, everything from the global political meltdown that came from the mortgage crises, believe it or not, the impacts of 9/11. It's all strung together. You can't blame it on just one political party and just one president or one particular White House regime. This stuff goes on a long, long way. And the Reserve has to find ways to make it more politically attainable. We have never in our lifetimes seen inflation like this, and it's nowhere near close to being done. We have not hit peak inflation, and the recession as we know it has not hit its rock bottom. You're probably going to see like a 0.75 basis point hit at some point from the Fed, hit our bonds. You're going to see the Fed come out and brutally hit interest rates before this thing is over with. And I'm going to call it right now, Doug. By the end of the summer, gasoline will hit on a national average to $7.
That is shocking. That's what gets people's attention. And I did read a little bit about how they changed the metrics in analyzing inflation, like you said a couple of years ago. One interesting take, and I can't remember the guy's name. Maybe I wrote it down here.
John Williams, the economist? No.
Yes, exactly. I was supposed to say Williams. And one of the things he came back with, which I kind of get, is that, well, he talked about the quality of goods, right? In the sense that, well, the quality has decreased. That if you really wanted to buy the same level of quantity of an item, that you're going to be paying even more so than that. So not only is the inflation that you spoke about, but the quality of goods in general has decreased. So if you want to purchase something at the quality it was years ago, that can impact inflation as well. So yeah, it's the $7 of gas is scary. I mean, holy crap! You look at what's going on now, and it's $7. We'll have to make a note to follow that up at the end of the summer. But that's shocking.
The national average today is at 5. So that's the national average. But in pockets of the United States, it's quickly creeping up to 6. And when you have, the giant proportion of people in California that are all well paying over 6 right now, and when New York with the taxes is getting there, and you have a lot of lawmakers in the U.S. that are really hesitant to push gas taxes away, hesitant to do, much about price fixing. And you can understand why, there's a likelihood it's going to creep up that high. Add to that, OPEC doesn't really feel any sort of pressure from U.S. lawmakers to do anything about not lessening the easing of drilling. There is nothing coming out of Washington, D.C. about increasing drilling exploration. We only have so much that we can do with refining. People forget that part. We can drill all we want. We can import all we want of raw oil, but you've got to refine it into something usable. There's only so much we can do with refining. And one of the main areas of gas importation that we've cut off because of their actions in the Ukraine. So again, buddy, there's only so much we can do. Americans are traveling. They're going on vacations. They're taking all of that money they've made with their new jobs that they're probably all going to lose in the next year, and going on these wonderful trips. And jet fuel is going through the roof, which means people are going to start making that instead of gasoline. So yeah, bud, I think gas is going to hit $7 before the end of the summer.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Crazy times for sure.
Yep. Sell that Suburban, folks.
There you go.
What you got for us, Dan?
I am jumping into some stuff I read over the weekend, and I think you've probably heard of the concept of just in time. And in the last year or so, it's been replaced by just in case, which is a fun term to say, holy shit, we don't want to be out of stuff anymore, so let's import a lot of it. And I'm here to tell you that I think the pendulum has swung too far to the other side. in the sense that I read some reports that Walmart, Gap, Target, and a lot of other retailers out there have excess inventory that is equivalent to about $45 billion. And I think there's a couple things that are of note in that is that we are now in an experience economy. I think before we talked about goods and services. Goods was when things were going crazy in the moment of the pandemic. Peloton bikes, things you could touch and feel and work with in your home. That was the stuff, right? Those are the goods. And as you just said a second ago, we're now into the services aspect, goods and services, or the experience economy. Yeah, gas is $5 a gallon on national average, but people are still going on vacation. Goods are focused on pandemic related, post-pandemic, it's service. So I think what transpired is you had the C-suite and C-level folks of these big multinationals were like, we cannot be out of this product, do what it takes to get it in-house. By the time it got here, the consumers pivot their buying habits and what's important to them right now. So there's a lot of stuff that's en route in a warehouse that may not be turning as fast as it wanted to because consumers have pivoted, right? So I think what does the future hold? It may be pretty self-evident, but there's going to be a lot of fire sales. If you're going back to school, things at the end of the summer. It's going to be good deals because what's right behind all this shit that's in the warehouses is a whole bunch of things for the holidays. And so you just got to push it out. But all of this, even though with the $5 on average, $5 per gallon, we're still, truly believe this, Pete, in the roaring 20s. We've just flipped from goods to now services. And I'm not sure what the other word is after goods and services, but I think that we're getting to the end of it. But the roaring 20s is still happening, my man. We switched into an experience economy, and the retailers didn't pivot as fast, and there's a lot of stuff sitting around a lot of buildings.
Yeah, buddy. I think we talked about this once before. You got a lot of retailers that bought a bunch of stuff, and they bought it because they were worried about the supply chain. And now they've got warehouses just chock full of things. And unfortunately, it's the wrong things. It's a lot of stuff that consumers just don't want. So now they're in this unenviable position. They got to get rid of it. So you hear about Target and Walmart, and those are always the two everybody talks about, Target and Walmart, who are considering having these ridiculous July 4th sales and ridiculous back to school sales to get rid of things that were winter inventory that showed up in the dead of winter and have been sitting in warehouses since spring. And a lot better than I do, warehousing is crazy expensive right now. So to have inventory wrapped up in a warehouse that you could be doing a lot better with, selling stuff that's actually going to move, that's a really difficult, financially draining situation. And as you just said, we've got an armada of ships that are about to show up with a bunch of crap you want to sell right now. Where are you going to put it? What are you going to do with it? It's a brutal lesson yet again in a long line of years now of lessons nobody wanted to learn from the pandemic. It just keeps on coming. And, we're playing whack-a-mole right now with COVID over in China. They're doing more closures all the time now. They're doing testing again in Beijing and Shanghai, closing down big parts of the city again, testing people, talking about shutting down parts again. So now they're getting worried again, saying, we started the rush on the holidays early. Should we start rushing it even more? Like, what, they can't get a hold of raw materials. Doug, this is just the dog that keeps chasing its tail over and over and over again. At what point is this going to get any better? It all comes down to inventory. And I think this may be where the computers and the big thinkers come in, bigger thinkers than us, and start to get ahead of understanding what it is consumers want, buying less and doing more with it, and possibly making higher profits and higher margins on having the right kind of stuff available. And I'm wondering if it's going to be companies like Amazon and like my employer that start to use mathematics, start to use machine engineering, start to use AI to get a better idea of what people are going to want before they want it, make it available, and just expect higher profit margins. Oh, one more thing. I wonder if someone like Amazon is going to do a second Prime Day to clear out all that inventory that they need to clear out before, if something similar to that would happen with Target, if they would do a Prime Day, because they're certainly known for their online shopping as well.
Yeah. Well, Prime Day is coming up. I don't know the exact dates of it, but it's always a summer event. So you're right. Prime Day is maybe the ultimate day of Prime. So we'll have to see.
Get rid of it. Just fire sale it. I mean, think about how much they've got to have coming in. Jeez. That brings to halftime, buddy.
Yeah. I love it. And obviously, halftime's brought to everybody, you and I and our listeners, by Cap Logistics. Please visit caplogistics.com for supply chain logistics solutions that we've just been talking about. So with that being said, I don't know, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
Oh, I'm pretty upset about this one, man. So we've never hidden it, right, Doug? You and I are both really into rock and roll, and we both have an affinity for 70s and 80s, maybe even 90s, right? Glam rock metal, hair metal, metal, speed metal, just metal. We like rock. And there was a really sad news report that came out over the weekend about Ozzy Osbourne, lead singer of Black Sabbath, went on to a whole bunch of great success all on his own. And it's this report that he's going to have a surgery that will really determine his quality of life going forward. Now, Ozzy's no spring chicken. He's up there in years. And not only that, as Keenan pointed out prior to the show, guy's lived a spirited life. I think he snorted up half of the cocaine producing countries in one nostril, and then most of Afghanistan up the other one. So this guy has done some drugs. It should be of no surprise to anyone that the guy's wrecked his body. But he's Ozzy. Like he's sort of up there with Keith Richards in that we always thought he'd endure, and he's just such a badass, and we love Ozzy. And the idea that this guy who we grew up with watching him be such a train wreck and such a badass and kind of represented what it was to be a rock and roll star is now going through all these terrible surgeries and just trying to keep his crap together. It's just this realization to me, man, that a lot of our idols, they're mortal. And we're going to start seeing, they're not going to die from choking on their own vomit or driving off a bridge. They're going to have heart attacks and colon cancer and die peacefully in their sleep. And it's going to be a bummer. It's going to be a really big bummer, man. I'm not ready for it. I'm not. When Prince died, I had to take a day off from work. When David Bowie died, I was a wreck for a week. And I'm just not ready for it, Doug.
Yeah. Well, they're going to come fast and furious. Eddie Van Halen last year, smoking, lung cancer, that one. And I started thinking that the two things popped in my mind on this story. Number one was the Def Leppard Rock of Ages, where they said it's better to burn out than fade away. So I think the lifestyle of these iconic rockers, basically they're going to burn out. Things are going to happen quick. And the other thing is I was looking at the Osbournes. You remember that show on MTV?
Yeah, man.
So you and I are in the sixth decade of our lives, right around the 50 mark. Ozzy was freaking like 52 years old when that show came out. And the guy looked like he was 90, right? He's essentially would be one of our peers right now on that show. And so talk about experiencing hard living and how that can affect you. I was just thinking, because I was like, the Osbournes, how old was Ozzy back then? Freaking like 53 years old. And I was like, God bless, I thought that guy was 75 at the time. So anyway, it is a crazy time.
Man, when I saw Black Sabbath with my buddy Yankee, we went and saw them, I don't know, it was probably like 10 years ago. I don't know. We saw him at Great Woods. He forgot the words to Paranoid halfway through the song. And everybody else is upset about it. I'm like, that's the most Ozzy shit ever. Like that's kind of what I expect from Ozzy at this point, because his brain's addled. And it was great. And he was such a showman, and he was still fabulous. And the show was great. And I loved it. And it was the first and only time I ever saw Ozzy. And it was perfect, And Slayer, right? What's going to happen when the guys in Slayer have to wear adult diapers on stage. I'm not going to be okay with that, man. I'm going to see Paul McCartney this summer at Fenway. And Paul McCartney's like 1,000 years old, but he still gets up there and he's perfectly cool with it. Ozzy can't keep his crap together. What happens when the guys from Metallica are going up there in wheelchairs with oxygen masks? I'm not going to be okay with all that, man. I'm not going to be okay with it. AC/DC can't play anymore because someone can't hear.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to come fast and furious. We could have a topic on that every week for sure.
Every week. So. What you got for me, Doug? What's your halftime?
All right. So this one, I saw it, I think, end of last week maybe, and it's going to be validated by my wife. She says, never talk about me on the show, but I'm going to have to. Not by name. So here's something. The name Gary, Gary, as a name is dying off. Nobody's naming their kids Gary anymore, right? There's a handful of them out there that you could probably say. I don't think I know anybody that's under the age of like 20 that's named Gary, right? And doing some research, it peaked in the 40s, early 50s. And they think, meaning some of the research in this baby name site that I looked at, is because of Gary Cooper. And he was kind of a big actor coming up. And so all the parents were like, I want my son to be like Gary Cooper. But Gary, I don't know how this statistic comes up, but they mean this baby name website said there was only like 250 kids that were born in 2021, babies born in 2021, that were actually named Gary. And I started thinking about that. So here's the take with my better half. She is a first grade teacher. If there's ever a gauge on what names are popular, it's going to be a first grade teacher, right?
Yep.
So this one kind of surprised me and really defines a kid for the rest of his life. Cash, C-A-S-H, is kind of a popular name. I'm like, okay, we'll do it. Noah is another popular name. Lots of kids coming through with Noah. And then Emma and Olivia, which are kind of traditional names. Those have come back. And so look for that, moving forward. Gary on the way out. Cash, you better be a badass when you grow up if your name is Cash. I'll tell you that.
Yep.
And if you're not, you're going to get pummeled quite a bit whenever you're moving along in your life. But anyway, those are the names, at least in Denver, Colorado, first grade, are catching some steam. So anyway, Gary's out. Cash, Noah, Emma, and Olivia are in.
Yeah, if you've never read Freakonomics, Doug, there's an excellent chapter in it about how names ebb and flow, how people in the higher echelon of economics tend to give their children a certain name. And over the course of the next 10 years, it becomes adopted by people at the lower economic echelons. And as it becomes adopted by people in lower economic echelons, people in higher economic echelons stop naming their children those names. And it's an ebb and flow. So for every Tiffany and Brittany, whose parents are millionaires, 20 years from now, they'll no longer be Tiffany's and Brittany's. And it's exactly what happened with those sorts of names. They become adopted by people. And it's fascinating to see the kind of work that they did on it. It was a really cool chapter. But for me, what was interesting was, my daughter's name is Charlotte. And when we named her that a long, long time ago, we looked it up. It was not a common name at all. It was an incredibly uncommon name, as a matter of fact. And now it's become extremely common. But what I have noticed is names like John, Bill, right? How many Bobs have you met recently, Doug? Little kids named Bob. Just a guy named Bob. What's going on, Bob? Jim, little Jim here. You're Henry. What's going on, Hank? You don't meet guys like that anymore. When I was a little kid, and because my grandfather was a bookie, spent a lot of time in car shops. I met a lot of guys that were working on cars in the 1970s with names like Hank and Jim and Bob and Jack. Don't meet a lot of those guys anymore. Everyone's got to give their kid a name that makes them super special and unique. I have a name that I've hated since I was a boy. I don't like the name Peter. I've never liked it. I've always hated it. But as I grew older, I found out that it's a Sicilian tradition that you name your son after his grandfather.
Nice.
So,
Well, there's not, when I was asking about our names, she's never taught a Doug. She's been doing this for quite a long time. So that makes me a little nervous. Peters, there's not as many Pete, there's Peters, and nobody named Keenan. So
No,
I don't know what to say about that one.
I know a couple of Keenans that are little kids. Yeah. I know a couple of Keenans. And Dougs, I don't know any Dougs, buddy. And all the Dougs I know are British. So they're either like Scottish or Welsh or English, but I do know a lot of Douglases. And they don't go by Doug. They go by Douglas. They go by the full name.
Yeah.
And for little boys, there's never any Petes. But in my family, because of the Sicilian things, we had so many Peters. So it was Petey, Peter, Pete, Big Petey, Little Petey, Petey from Brockton, Jimmy's Pete. There was like all these Petes. So, yeah, I was little Petey, if you can imagine that, because I've never been little. I came out big. I'm still big. Yeah.
Well, as long as there's they don't name a boy named Sue.
Oh, man,
there
speaking of cash. And whenever I play that song for kids that have never heard it, they're like, this was on the radio? Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lucky your name's not Sue, kid. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man. Let's flip back into the gears. Tell me what you got for number 2.
So number 2 is fascinating. It's a fun one because we've all been talking so much about the West Coast port strike that we kind of lost track of the fact that port strikes happen all over the world. And recently, there was a work stoppage in German by German dock workers. And they're asking, like any other dock worker, to be taken a little more seriously, paid a little more money, given a little more time off. And it's causing some real bedlam. And it swings attention back, right, to 2 very important topics. The first is when you have a port strike, it really jacks up spot rates on those lanes. And we're seeing that immediately. So you have your core carriers who go China to Germany have already said they're going to add additional voyages, additional strings, and all of the voyages that were currently impacted already gone up. So you're already seeing an impact on rates as you would expect. Second of all, you're already seeing people begin to say, well, how come nobody was talking about the fact that the West Coast, the ILW and the PMA, they kicked this thing a couple of weeks forward because they weren't getting anywhere. And now it's June 13th and their contract ends on July 1st. And kind of doing the math here, that's not a whole lot of time. And this seems like a super important thing. And what are we going to do? Right? I mean, there are all these things that are converging again. China opening up again. And, I used to ride on ships across the Pacific, super long trip. And if I'm doing my math right, the stuff that's about to get sent over here, it should hit right around the time a slowdown would happen. So if China's opening up again hits just about right. If these guys decide to do a work slowdown or just do it by the book, Doug, if they decide to just do everything by the book, nothing special, their slowdown could start right when those vessels start showing up in the beginning of July. Mm-hmm. And if they decide to just walk, if they decide to really do a strike, it would screw up Christmas. It'll screw up all the back to school stuff. I mean, we'll all be wearing the crap that Target and Walmart have got and giving away presents that Target and Walmart have got in their warehouses because that's all that's going to be available. It will be, hey, bright side, it's going to be great for the supply chain because we're going to just clear everything out. Like it's going to be, we're going to have everything cleared out. We're going to be able to export all those empties because the ships aren't going to have anything on them, right? So on the East Coast, we'll just ship everything out of the East Coast. It's going to be wonderful for the backlog. But my gosh, Doug, I think for the first time, I'm actually worried. Everybody went to the White House saying, get in there and do something about this. And the White House and, Secretary Weld and not Weld, I can't remember the guy from Massachusetts, and Buttigieg, they're all like, yeah, here you go. We'll make some phone calls, but I don't think anyone's really done anything about this. And everyone else is running around holding hands, singing Kumbaya, saying it's all going to be okay. Man, I'm not so sure it's going to be okay anymore. I'm getting actually genuinely nervous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's weird that it hasn't made any, the media hasn't glommed on it. It hasn't, it's almost like a magician, sleight of hand. Look over here. Don't look over here while something's going on. And so I don't know. It's baffling to me that nobody's talking about it, at least from my perspective. There's not a lot of press on it. It's just there. Part of me says they're just going to kick the can down the road because everybody has too much at stake to halt the brakes or flex any muscles. But part of me says, if there's ever a time to flex the muscle, even for a little bit,
It's now.
this would be the year to do it. So I don't even know how to go out, or how it's going to go down. But it is interesting that the biggest thing is, why the hell haven't we heard more about it? Because, like you said, it's like 2 weeks away.
Yeah, they've got a media blackout, so we do know that both parties, did whatever pinky swear they had to do to say they weren't going to talk about it. But come on, like no one's going to break that and say something to the press, please.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just think it's crazy, Doug. But I'm nervous. I'm really nervous. So I'm waiting for someone to come out there and tell us that we don't need to be. But in doing so, I guess you erode their negotiation foundation. So I don't know, Doug.
Yeah, interesting. Well, that kind of flows into my last topic a little bit, which is somewhat reactionary, but it makes sense if you just kind of walk through it. I think that Mexico is going to be kind of the new factory of the world. I think there's a lot of things happening. When the C-level people were like, get the stuff over at C-level, meaning, chief this officer and chief that officer. We need stuff here now, do what you need to do. And then we're in this inventory challenge and situation that we're in. Same thing happened where they're like, find alternative sources. So I don't think that Mexico is going to replace anything that's going on overseas, but it's certainly going to be, a supplement, find supplement suppliers. And I think the fact that the USMCA is involved, I think there's going to be more interest in taking advantage of those things. And the biggest one, Pete, that I think is going to happen is automobiles. That's what you hear about, rolling into Mexico. And I think finally, because of supply chain challenges and looking for alternative sourcing strategies, is that you're going to see a lot of other industries really embrace it. You got automotive and aerospace to some degree, but definitely automotive. But I think medical, electronics, textiles, I think that finally out of necessity, people are going to say Mexico's right there. There's the border that's shared with the U.S. There's no longshoremen. There's no vessels. It's not controlled by, a mafia type of entity across the world that we have minimal control over. And so I really think you're going to see a lot of interest, more so than ever. Now, it used to be words and rhetoric. Oh, we love the USMCA. We're going to go down there. We're going to do this, that, and the other. Now, I think it's starting to happen. And it's being noticed because there's other commodities beyond auto manufacturing and aerospace that's starting to pop up down there. And here's from, you and I, not now, but I know your history and my history for my whole career has been in the service provider. There's the user of services and the provider of services. And I think if you are a provider of services, not only with transportation, logistics, whatever it is, but if you have the ability to help a company enter in to a market like Mexico, how do I do it? How do I set up so I'm compliant? How the hell do I find employees? What do I do to position myself for success as an alternative supply source in Mexico? You're in an amazing opportunity to really help clients and customers and tap into that market. So I think Mexico, new factory of maybe not the world, excuse me, but definitely North America. You're going to see more action down there. I think you've seen in a long time outside of automotive.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. I think that this is a perfect storm logistically and a perfect storm economically as well. They've done an excellent job of creating a education environment for people to come, return, stay in Mexico. You have a lot more engineers than I think people realize, a lot more people who are well educated and prepared to be part of that workforce. You have the ability to access raw materials, which people don't talk enough about in Mexico that you don't necessarily in the U.S. You have free trade agreements with most of the world in Mexico that you don't necessarily have in the U.S. And the supply chain just continues to strengthen between these two countries in a way that allows for more predictability than ever before between the U.S. and Mexico. So I do agree with you. I think it's going to take a president with vision, who's willing to take the time to really scope out a 20-year, 25-year plan between the two to create a stronger logistics infrastructure between the two. And that's really going to be the last strong tie. And you're going to see it really impact Chinese economic futures, because you've got a really good partner who wants to work with us. And there's really nothing stopping us but just a freer flow of goods. I agree, Doug. I think that I've been saying it for a long time. Mexico is an excellent place for the U.S. to invest. We just need to have two groups of leaders that want to just sit down and get through all of the silliness and cut right to it. Yeah. You want to keep immigration low from Mexico to the U.S., give people in Mexico jobs. They don't want to come here either.
Yeah, that's perfect. And the last thing I neglected to say is that the median age in Mexico, because I was checking this out before our show, is 29.
Wow.
The median age in America, 38 and a half.
Wow.
China, 38.
Wow.
So they got, a lot of prosperous years and young, hungry labor that is tapped in. So it's ripe. And I think the key thing is the automotive. It's going to go beyond automotive.
Absolutely.
But the partnership you spoke about is going to be paramount, because it's there. You write a couple documents, you both sign it, you move on. But if you have some leaders that embrace it collaboratively, look out.
Yeah. And I think one more thing to keep in mind is with Latin America and South America continuing to grow, and they've got young populations continuing to grow. Mexico can become a manufacturing hub for there as well. We tend to forget that. There's so much opportunity there as well. And Canada on the outside looking in again, hopefully becoming an energy source for all of it. But I wish that country would just make more Canadians. It would make this a lot easier for all of us. Someone's got to send them some Barry White tapes and, get them off on some vacations. They got to double the size of that country. It would just make everything so much easier for everyone. Right, Doug.
Yeah,
so I guess with that, I'll count us out of here. As always, we want to thank our patrons, the good people at Cap Logistics, who week after week give us a platform to talk to you about what we think is going to be happening, not what has happened in the worlds of logistics, international trade, economics, and transportation. We want to thank Keenan, who does everything he can to keep us on balance, make sure that everything stays together for us here at Global Trade This Week. I want to thank Doug, who for whatever reason, continues to come back and put up with me. And we want to thank you, all the wonderful people who watch and listen and tell your friends about us. And hopefully you continue to. It is not easy for you to find time every week to listen to us. And we do appreciate the fact that you do. We hope we keep bringing you content that makes it worthwhile. And with that, always leave comments. Always tell us things you'd like to hear more about. We do listen. We do pay attention. And thank you. And I guess I'll see you next week. Take it easy, Doug. See you next week with more Global Trade This Week.
Safe travels this week, my friend.
Thanks, pal. See you next week.